And a lot has happened since then. For those of you who saw it, it was really a platform for me to find the stranger who saved my life. In a story that I tell on the TED Talk, when I'm standing on the edge of a bridge alone, a stranger comes and pulls me off of the bridge. And then I had never seen him again. I knew that he was wearing a light brown jacket. He lived in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia about 15 years ago. That was all I knew. But I knew that I wanted to find him because I knew I didn't even know if he was real, actually. I thought maybe that I had just made him up and, as a way to get through this difficult time in my life. So a couple of years ago, I think it was 2 years ago now, 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. I gotta be very specific with these things, apparently. I wanted to help, or I wanted help in finding this person. I had put in a Freedom of Information Act request. Yeah, a couple of chuckles around there. So they're still actually fighting it. It doesn't even matter. I don't even need it anymore, but I'm still going to keep fighting them for it. I pulled all my medical records, which didn't have anything about him. But if you ever want to know something about yourself, read the notes that your therapist writes about you, or your doctor, or anybody else. It was a part of my self-discovery process, anyway. But it didn't matter because nothing was in any of that stuff that was helpful. So that's when Canada AM was still on the air, and it was after Bell Let's Talk. I just did what I've been doing for more than a decade, and I wanted the public's help in finding this stranger. And I wanted to do it after Bell Let's Talk because I'm a huge supporter. If any of you follow me on Twitter, you'll get your whole feed will be flooded. Well, I'll flood your feed anyway, but especially on Bell Let's Talk. I do tweets every minute and a half for 28 hours straight, so it will literally flood your feed. But I wanted to do it the day after because I'm also a big fan of talking every day, not just on one day a year. It's what I do for a living, both in my personal and professional life. So the producers thought that was great, that they wanted to continue it on as well. It happened to be a Bell program and station, so that helps. But so when I went on and they showed little clips of the TED Talk and I asked for the public's help, and then I'm in the car on the way back to my apartment in Canada AM, then you have to be there at 4:30 in the morning for these morning shows. So I don't even know how people saw it when it had first aired, but I started getting messages on Twitter and on Facebook right away from this story because it had gone viral throughout the world, throughout the day. And by 9 o'clock that morning, I think, I had messages from people who said that they knew who I was talking about, this guy who saved my life. One of them said that he was his brother-in-law. Another said that he was his roommate at the time. He came home and told him that he just saved a kid off a bridge, at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that apparently he had, the brother-in-law actually, who lived in Halifax at the time, had seen the TED Talk that I had done a couple of years earlier. He sent the TED Talk a week prior to this to that stranger and told him, I think he's talking about you. And I think this is that guy that you've been talking about for 10 years or 13 years at the time. And it turns out that it was. And a week before I went on Canada AM to ask for the public's help in finding this stranger, he had seen that TED Talk and he had started writing me a letter in case someday he had ever found me. So he had this letter written by this time. They asked if they could send it to me. I agreed, and they did. And I do a lot of things in my life where I kind of just do them, and I don't really fully appreciate the consequences until I'm already halfway down the road. And this was one of those things, because I was like, wow, well, now what do I do? Here's there's this thing that happened in my life. There's this big gap in my story for all this many years. That my story had just kind of grown up around, and I had learned, and then here's this, it turns out, first of all, this guy's real. He sent me a letter, it's sitting in my inbox, in my email. Now what do? I have to rewrite my whole talk. This is super, there's just a lot of stuff going on in my head at the time. So I finally opened it. It was the email, the letter that he had written me at midnight that night. It took me 8 hours to open it. And as you do in most of the most vulnerable times in your life, I flicked on the camera on my iPad and recorded myself reading this letter, which that's a normal thing to do. That's what normal people do. So if you ever want to see a video of somebody really ugly crying that the whole world has now seen, you can look up this video on YouTube of me reading the letter. And when I did that, and he told me his side of that story, his name is Mike, by the way, for those of you who didn't see that part. He introduced himself, and I finally had a name to call him. But he told me that whole evening that I tried to kill myself on that bridge that night, but it was from his perspective. So it was like watching my own story that I had been telling for more than a decade. I've been talking about this guy for a decade. I had no idea who he was. But he told me the whole story back again from a different set of eyes, and it was such an odd experience. Like it was almost like hearing my own story for the first time from somebody else. So that was really what provoked so much development, I think, in my story since that. We met. I flew him up to Toronto. I knew we needed to meet in person, and brought Canada M along again because the cameras follow me wherever I go, apparently, especially on this story. And we met. We've been in touch ever since. Actually, I was just talking to him like 2 nights ago, so we still text back and forth sometimes about different things.